Ma nishtana ha-Shabbat hazot? Why is this Shabbat different from all other Shabbats? Well, traditionally, the Shabbat that comes right before Pesach is known as Shabbat Hagadol, or the Great Shabbat. For more than 1,000 years, it has been customary for the rabbi to offer a lengthy sermon that outlined in detail many of the laws regarding Pesach. Things like how to make sure that your kitchen was kosher for Passover, what to do if the Seder overlaps with Shabbat, how to make matzahs, etc. Thankfully, some of the customs for this Shabbat have since changed. Some, of course, but not all of them. So tonight, instead of talking to you about the laws of Pesach, I want to tell you a little bit about the significance of the story that they command us to consider. And to further break with custom, I'll try my best to keep it brief. Of all the explanations for this holiday, one strikes me as the most compelling. Passover is an orderly ceremony of sacred storytelling, a moment both to recreate and to participate in an act of continued collective memory. Avadim hayinu, we were slaves, reads the Haggadah, our ancestors in their time, and we in ours. Vayotzienu Adonai Eloheinu misham, and from there we were rescued, our ancestors in their time, and we in ours. The holiday contorts our sense of history, warping the great timeline of the Jewish past so that it folds onto itself and meets us here, in the present. The story of the Exodus becomes a timeless truth, reaffirmed again and again by each generation, that in the language of the prayer book, wherever we are, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. But, as we know, some find this impersonal explanation unsatisfactory. What is this ritual to you, the wicked child asks with disdain. Why do you find it meaningful? Even on a night of questions, this one seems to cut a little too deeply, but only because of how precisely it captures the spirit of the holiday. Only because to answer, we must read ourselves into the story and be able to explain to them what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. Only because that question is a really good one. So, how would you answer? In one more recent Haggadah, the rabbis offer their reply. Since the question is you and not we, this child stands apart from our community, they say. Therefore, we should respond, we do this because of what God did for us when we came out of Egypt, for all of us. Even if this child had been present at the Exodus, the meaning of redemption would not have been understood by them. We hope to reach the alienated by inviting them to share in our celebration of liberation. Their response doesn't sit very well with me, and for two reasons. First, they reject the premise of the question altogether. Whereas the child wants to know a more personal account of liberation, the rabbis pivot toward the collective kosher for Passover cookie-cutter response, because they say, we all find it meaningful. And so they label the child an outcast, an alien in need of invitation. And this leads to my second point. The so-called wicked child is not standing apart from our community. No, they are sitting alongside each of their siblings at the Seder table. The privilege of their presence has been completely disregarded. To offer them any invitation is to forget that they are presently bearing witness to the sacred enactment of the story of redemption. With the turn of each page of the Haggadah, the story, both ancient and contemporary, unfolds. The wicked child was present at the Exodus because they are present at the Seder. And yeah, they don't really get it. Maybe they could be a little more polite, but underlying their confusion is the need for concrete examples of these abstract metaphors. How do you relate to slavery, they ask. What was your Egypt? Tell me, they cry, how did you become free? With this question, they are privileging your personal experience of the ritual, not because they demean or disparage the ritual itself, but because they seek understanding and they see you as their role model. What an awesome and reverential responsibility they bestow on us. So, how would you answer? I was once told a joke about the reason that we have Haggadot at Passover, in order, and I quote, for us to say der right words. I think this joke isn't very funny, in part because it isn't very accurate. The word Haggadah translates to the telling. It also shares its root with a word in a biblical verse that the early rabbis cite as part of their response to the wicked child. Vehigadata. And you shall tell the child in your presence on that day, it is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. A reply I find much more compelling. The words on the pages of the Haggadah are right only if they prompt you to speak of your personal experience, to tell the people at your Seder how you relate to this master narrative that we all share. And it's not always easy to do that. Sometimes we don't want to share. Sometimes the questions challenge us, make us feel put on the spot or vulnerable, and for good reason. They cut through the facade of pleasantries and strike at the core of the matter, touching our deepest and most preciously held values. It can be easy to dismiss these kinds of pointed and probing questions as wicked or childish, and to respond to them with some generic answer. But we learn from the wicked one that these questions are just poorly packaged opportunities to share an answer that only we can give, to share on a personal level why these values matter to us, an answer that regardless of how many newspaper articles they read or how many podcasts they listen to, they could never get on their own. May this Shabbat, the one right before Pesach, serve to remind us about the privilege of presence. May we come to appreciate having all of our guests, regardless of which of the four children they might remind us of most. They are all sitting at the same table, and that is a blessing. And may we try to embrace their questions, however sharp they might be. May we answer them authentically and personally. May we answer them by reading ourselves into our master story and by sharing what we find to be most meaningful.